Hi there. Can you hear me? No.
Okay. Hi.
Hi, now I can hear you. Perfect.
Great. Okay, so I'm gonna call, was not, or I'm gonna text.
Great.
Thank you. Actually, I'll just give her a call. Hi. Yeah. Okay, and you see you go to the link that says 70 faces, right? So it's not a regular Zoom link. What it is it's HTTPS colon. Oh, there's no. You're just, you want to click on the link. I just sent it to you. I'll send it to you again. Let me send it to you again, and you just go right to your email.
Oh,
Oh,
I see. Oh, it's not.
oh, she's here. Fabulous. Thank you. I do. Thank you. Oh, she lost. It's okay. You'll try again. It's okay. It's okay. Okay. Mara, does she need a code, or can you
No.
just? No, you don't need a code, sweetie. Okay. Yeah. Oh, we started. It's just Mara, who's Mira's colleague, and she's going to be helping us today. And we're just, so if you just go to the 70 faces link that I just sent you. Okay. Okay.
She's here.
You're in. Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
You're muted, but we
Hi,
can.
everybody.
Okay, perfect. And now we can hear you.
Am I muted?
Not
No,
anymore.
you're perfect. We can hear you, sweetie. We can
Okay,
hear you.
great. Great. So, you know what? Maybe this is better. Okay.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you so much for joining in. I think we met you before.
Yes. So I work closely with Mira, so I know it's confusing. We have very similar names. But she's just a little bit under the weather, so I will be helping out today, and that is
Thank you so
lucky
much.
for me.
Thank you. We need as much help as we.
No, that's not it. It's we're excited to continue sharing both of your stories and your research, and yeah, it's a pleasure to be able to do things like this.
Thank you. So Mara has a copy of the PowerPoint that we just pulled together.
Okay.
So she's going to be in charge of, we'll ask her to change, but we only have 20 slides to change. So it'll be a lot faster than the 67 we had last time. And Mara, you wanted us to be like half an hour, 40 minutes, something like that?
Sure. You know, we normally, you can go that far for your presentation, and then we may also just have some time for questions if you don't mind staying.
No, it's fun.
Yeah.
We there were so many questions last time we didn't answer any. I mean,
yeah,
we need to.
And how many, do you know how many people have registered for this one?
We kept the same registration. So
okay, so you'll see.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Lovely. Should we go? Do you want to go to should we try some, I don't know, do you want to go into the PowerPoint to see, make sure everything works? Maybe we can pull up the music from slide
Sure.
21 to make sure everything is good.
Okay, great. I will
Thank you.
share the screen. And I'll be putting in slideshow so you can see it.
Beautiful.
So it takes me to the link.
Okay. That's
Are
okay.
you-
You
Yeah,
can just have it playing in the background as people are coming in. Do you want to do it that way? And then we
Sure.
can still talk about him at the very end.
can you hear it?
I
Okay.
can't.
I cannot hear the music either.
Okay, let me just change my settings.
And Oznat, do you want to change your name to Oznat God instead of Oznat's iPhone?
iPhone?
Oh, maybe Mara can do that. Change her
I
name.
Sure.
What
Thank
is
Yeah, I
that?
can.
No,
Yes.
Oznat, Mara will take care of it. Don't have to worry.
Thank you. Okay, great.
GAD is your last
GAD,
name?
yes, yeah.
Okay, great.
I'm gonna get my sweater. It's a little chilly here.
Great. And I'm so sorry, Sarah. I don't have a bio for you on hand. Is there anything I can do to introduce you?
You can just say, I am the author of a political economic history of the Jews of Afghanistan.
Great.
And I work at Hillel at the University of New Mexico.
Great.
I'm the director.
As a former Hillel professional, I am very much thinking of you. It's not easy right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
But Hillel is doing such a great job. Hillel is doing such a phenomenal job. Unbelievable. Protecting
you.
kids is just amazing.
Thank
The
you.
kids are very confused.
The mess. Oh my gosh. No, it's just, they're just getting clobbered. Our kids are just getting, it's
They
just.
didn't even know they were Jewish. They didn't even know what Jewish was or
That's
is.
true. That's true. So that's true. That'll be a portion of what
Yeah.
of kids I get. That's absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll put the picture, I'll put the book behind.
That's a great cover. That's a great cover. I still look at it and I say it's amazing.
It's yours.
Well, the designer did a great job.
Yeah, they did. They did. Oh, but that's all of them apparently. That's the background for the whole series.
Oh, the whole series, okay.
Yeah.
And the carpet in the back is phenomenal too.
Oh, thank you. It's just a cloth Bukharan. I put it up, for the event.
And your kaftan is great too.
Oh, thank you. See,
Oh, it's beautiful.
thank you. I like pulled out everything that I had. Like, okay. Thank you.
I should bring my Bukharian hat and wear it.
Oh, there. Yes.
Do we have time?
Yes.
Okay.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay, let me
You'll
go
be
get it.
fine.
Great.
Since he's lovely. Wow.
And how do you think I should introduce Osnat?
Osnat is a community leader. She is, we had it before, she is a businesswoman.
And she's a jeweler.
She's a jeweler.
Sure.
And she's a community leader. And she led the effort to preserve Jewish sites of Jewish heritage in Afghanistan. I'm just being vague because it's like the cemetery, the synagogue, a mikvah, like various things.
Yeah.
I really look an Afghan person now.
Oh my gosh, you do.
I think it's appropriate.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely. It's
at
perfect.
least I have a place to wear it.
I know, it's good. It's
Yeah.
important.
Yes. It's actually a Bukharian hat. It's not, but a lot of the Afghans wear it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so Osnat, how should we introduce you? As a jeweler, a businesswoman, community leader, and led the effort to preserve cultural sites?
I think maybe more my Afghan background, not as my profession.
Okay, so you were born in
Just born in, my parents were from Afghanistan and grew up on the traditional Afghan culture, Afghan Jewish culture. And Afghanistan was very important to my parents, basically.
and you come from a family that's before Mashhad, right? Before the Mashhad.
Yes, we think that my father's family was there before.
Okay, so
We're not sure. We're not sure because nobody knows. I know my paternal mom was from Ashad. And we know that my mom's both parents were from Ashad.
Okay.
But I think my father, because he owned land, he was the only Jew that owned land. He owned farms. He had 2 farms that we just found out that they're still registered under his name.
That's incredible.
Incredible. We're trying to verify everything. So
Amazing. Good. Okay.
I think we're at time. So I think if it's okay, I am happy to play music later, but I think it might be easier if we just
Okay, go for it. Whatever's best for you, sweetie. It's all good.
Okay, great. I'm going to admit everyone. Great.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome. While we're waiting for others to join the Zoom, please feel free to write in the chat where you're joining us from. It's always nice as we're learning about Jewish communities from all over the world to see you in your Jewish community from where you are. So we'll give everyone just a moment to do that. And then I'm happy to introduce our wonderful speakers today. Okay. Lots of sunny places, San Francisco, Los Angeles. I'm assuming it's sunny there. Wherever you are, thank you for being here and for spending this hour with us and with Sarah Koplik and Osnat Gad. If you were able to join us for part 1 last week, welcome back. If not, welcome, and we'll be sharing the resources to our previous chat via email later today. But enough of me chit-chatting. We're lucky to be hearing today from Sarah Koplik, who is the author of A Political and Economic History of Jews in Afghanistan. And she'll be sharing her research and more about the Jewish communities of Afghanistan. We're also joined by Osnat Gad, whose parents were born in Afghanistan and had a very deep love. I was hearing a little bit before the call, a very deep love of Jewish Afghanistan culture. She also was sidelining a little bit how much of a Jewish communal leader she is, and she makes beautiful jewelry and is part of the effort to preserve Jewish historical sites in Afghanistan. So I am going to share my screen in a moment and turn the microphone over to Sarah. During this session, you are welcome to use the chat to ask questions. We will try and get to questions this time. We do not promise that we'll get to every single one, but we will certainly address them. So feel free to use the chat, and thank you again for being here. Okay, here we go. Okay.
Thank you so much, Mara. We're just really glad that you're able to step in, and we wish Mira refuah shlema. So what we noticed last week was that there were lots of questions about women and education, and we weren't able to answer them. And so Osnat and I wanted to be able to do that today. So the first slide you're going to see is a picture of a Jewish school in Kabul in 1972. So these would be students who are learning about Jewish subjects, like religious school, like we would have, in other countries. So this would be for their religious education, not for their secular education. And Osnat, would you like to add in anything?
I was fascinated because you have girls and boys together. And even though it was an Orthodox religious sort of synagogue, of what I understand, I am fascinated that they did mix women and girls and boys together. Also, I'm very happy to see the Western clothing that they're wearing. This is 1970s, so they all, you can see the boy with the suspenders. You're seeing the girls with dresses. You're seeing a boy with I think it's a handkerchief on his head instead of a kippah. So it's very similar to, I would say, Hebrew school today. I mean, that's my opinion.
Absolutely, absolutely. But for secular education, children starting from the 1940s or 50s? Well, no, actually earlier. Was it they started to go to public school? When was that? When did they start to go to public school?
I think it was in the 30s that they started sending their children to the public school.
So that's, and so
during
that
the king's time.
So during Zahir Shah.
Yeah, yeah.
So during Zahir Shah, who came to be king in 1933, and there was a regent until the late 1940s. That was his uncle, because he was a very young man, and then he ruled until 1973. And during that time, Jewish children went to public schools. And so if we could have the next slide, please. So this is just an example of, and if we could go back one, right? And oops.
I'm sorry, my computer is being a little bit funky. We'll get there.
That's okay. If you're able to go to slide 3. Anyway, so public schools, so girls and boys both went to public schools in Afghanistan, and they would go to school on Saturday too. And but they would not write. I believe they would go and they would listen, but they wouldn't write. Is that, and Osnat, do you want to add anything about public schools?
I think the mixture of boys and girls together in public school was, very open-minded society. And in comparison today, girls are not allowed to go to school after the age of 12 in Afghanistan. Afghan girls are not allowed to go to school after the age of 12. So we're talking about 50 or 70 years ago, maybe 80 years ago, that it was very open society. Girls were dressed up, they were attractive, they wore makeup, they interacted with boys of the same age. And the Jewish girls were doing the same thing. It was just a wonderful period for the Afghan history.
Thank you. Thank you. If we could go to the next slide. This is a little girl that it comes from the Jewish Afghan Facebook group, a little Jewish girl in the 1950s. And you can see she's wearing an amulet that's written in Hebrew, as well as more traditional Afghan jewelry. Osnat, do you want to say anything about her?
It's the first time I see it, and she's very cute.
Yes, absolutely. And if we could go to the next picture. And so Osnat, this is one of you.
Yeah, so this is a midrash that was in the 1920s in Herat, and that the children would go to school with these people who were, rabbis, and a little timid looking, but I guess it was acceptable. They would sit in a room like a cheder, which was also in Europe, the same tradition, and they would learn the Torah and the tradition. And Afghanistan was not able to import Hebrew books or any traditional prayer books, only would have one. So everybody had to pray from the same book or learn the subject or the Torah from the same book. So they all had to learn Hebrew reading upside down. So they can read Hebrew, as on a regular, face, and then they would have to be able to read Hebrew, from the back side. They also had to memorize everything, because since they didn't have as many books, they all had to be memorizing the prayers, the stories. And until today, I remember my father knew all the prayers by heart. And but they also a very strict school. I remember, I know from my uncle that if they did not memorize or did not remember, they would be hitting. The teacher would hit them with a ruler, very painful. So there's a very strict background of learning that was, installed into these kids. It was very serious.
Thank you. And if we could have the next picture. So this is just a slide that came from the first Turkish ambassador in Afghanistan, and he wrote on the bottom that these were that the Herati Jews wear clothes like Afghans. So I thought that was interesting. So that would be early 20th century. And if we could go to the next slide. So Osnat, is this one of your family photos?
No, this is the family of Ambalu.
Okay.
And I think it's in either Herat. No, I think it's in Herat in 1970s, also bar mitzvah. And I think a few boys are being bar mitzvah. You can see with that fill-in on the arms.
Yes.
So again, they're all wearing Western clothes. Open boys and girls are being, in the same photo and communicating with each other. It was a pretty open society.
Yes, it seems like it.
And this man, I forgot his first name, but he actually was a very successful rug merchant. He opened a factory in Afghanistan with the silk rugs, and it's still working with Afghanistan. His children importing silk rug, which are very, very expensive, very beautiful.
My goodness, still today, that's incredible.
Yes.
So, and why would there be flowers on the bottom? Do you know? Is it just to make it a more beautiful picture, or would there be a reason?
What I see from all these pictures that they actually copied all the setting from European and Western magazines. Because in all these pictures, you can see the pocketbook, the flowers, they see, the clothing, the men with a coat on his shoulder, very handsome men with, John Lennon glasses. And then you're seeing the men, in the background with a hat that's a traditional Afghan hat. So you have, everybody had his own sense of, style. And I think I think it's very interesting. I think they emulated a lot of the Western culture. The Jews, not the Afghans, the Jews. They were much more modern than the Afghan citizens.
Thank you. Thank you. Could we go? And here's another picture from the
This
19th.
is another, yeah, this is another family. This is actually from my maternal, my grandmother family, my father's mom family,
Wow.
and their old brothers and their children. Also, you see with coats, jackets, suits, ties, modern hats. This is in the 50s, I think.
Yes.
I think this is before they came to Israel. So yes, so you can see, I would, you can take that as being in New York in the 1950s. I wouldn't see the difference.
It looks the same.
But this is actually in Harat as well. This is in Harat.
Which was more traditional than
Very traditional, very, sort of back, not very modern. They were not modern.
right. And let's have one more picture, one more slide, please. So this is yet another family with a mixture.
I think this is, yeah. So this is, again, the man is wearing a Bukharian jacket and a hat like me.
Mhm.
And while the men in the back are wearing the traditional Afghan hats. And so this must be a holiday picture, because that's how they would dress for the holiday, especially if they had a Bukharian background. So his mother was probably a Bukharian.
Wow.
So he would wear the Bukharian traditional clothing for their Seder. I think this is a Seder, or Jewish holiday.
Wow.
So that's how they would dress during that traditional dinner.
Oh, please go ahead.
No, I'm just showing the difference between the community. You had the traditional Afghan who were born there, who felt very Afghani. They had nothing to do with the Bukharian. And then you had another part of the community whose parents, or the mothers basically, were Bukharian, and they kept that tradition from the mother. And most of the food was Bukharian food, because the women would cook the Bukharian food, and they would also teach the other women the Bukharian food. So like my mom was a traditional Afghan woman, but she cooked the Bukharian food. So most of the women had both of them. So, and they would say, this is an Afghan food. Like when she would serve a dish, she said, this is an Afghan, and then she would serve a dish, this is a Bukharian.
Oh,
So we were very much aware of the difference.
So what was the difference?
Nothing.
Not really. Okay.
No, I mean, to me, there was nothing. Except that the Bukharian always thought that the Afghans were a little bit more backwards.
Oh, okay.
They don't, I mean, until today, you don't get that sort of, giving them the honor of being intelligent, smart, successful, attractive. They're the same. They all came from Mashhad. They're all related. Originally, yes.
Mashhad.
But there definitely were racial differences.
Okay. Thank you.
The Afghan people a little bit are darker, and the Bukharian are more white. There was also a difference. Like my father was very, very dark, and my mom was very, very white. So there was a class difference in the skin color.
Sarah, we're getting some really great questions in the chat.
Okay.
Would you prefer I ask them now or wait until the end?
Yeah, why don't you give us a question or two, Mara?
Sure. So you mentioned a little bit about folks learning about Western culture through magazines. Can you talk about that? Were there English magazines? Were there movies? Where were the cultural references?
Oh, it's not?
I think men would travel for the businesses, like we said last time, that they would go away for almost a year on traveling on business trips. And they would bring probably magazines, or maybe Russian, maybe European, maybe a lot of the men would go to England, or they would go to Russia for business. But Russia, again, was communist, so they couldn't go there in the 1930s and 50s. but they would go to England. They would also go to India. India had a lot of, European connection because they were an English mandate. Pakistan was also under the British rule, so they would have more the British Western magazine, and the Jews very much so. They saw the same clothing that they saw in the magazines. They made the same pocketbooks, the same suits like you're talking about, and they made all the clothing. They made all the clothing at home. So we see that actually from the 1930s on. From previous pictures, you see that the women wore very modern clothing, and they had no connection. They didn't have a phone. They wouldn't go on a plane. They were just like, this is what the men would bring them, and they would just emulate the same. They were probably very fascinated with the Western culture.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think you touched on this last time, but I wanted to ask again. Can you talk a little bit about the citizenship status of Jews?
Okay, so that was very important. We have, they lived in harmonious surrounding with the Afghan citizen. They were very much like, and the reason for that is that Afghans, the Pashtun actually feel that they are Bnei Israel. And they feel, and I don't know if I remember mentioning it, but they feel that Afghanistan was based on a Jewish, one of the Jewish hero who was actually Yeshua's son, Afghana. And so Afghanistan is named after him. Their Torah, their Bible is based on the Jewish Bible. And they always felt like cousins. Even though they're Muslim, they felt like cousins. So they were very well protected. So my father was a citizen of Afghanistan. We have his passports from 1927, that old passports. So they were recognized in Afghan citizenship. They would be able to travel freely throughout the borders. They had no problems. And they were actually very proud Afghans. Nothing was comparable in the United States to an Afghan weather, Afghan clothing, Afghan food. I mean, whenever they would converse, it would be like, oh, our food was much better in Afghanistan, or like the fruit was better. There was a lot of comparison to that country. Okay. And we felt, and we as children, we felt that, what are you talking about? This is like a background. I was embarrassed to say that my parents are from Afghanistan for many years. Because of that, people didn't even know where Afghanistan was.
Wow. But there was a period of time in the middle of the 1930s where the Afghan government tried to take away the citizenship of all of the Jews. They wanted to expel the whole Jewish population in the middle 1930s. And the British said no, that they were not allowed to do that. And you couldn't expel the whole population. And if the Afghan government under Muhammad Hashim Khan, the regent for Zahir Shah, if he had done that, England would have prevented any Afghan from entering into India. So at that time, the Afghan Jews were protected in a sense by the British. So it also makes sense that through that protection, there would be also an emulation of clothing and customs, Western clothing and customs, because they also helped to protect the community. But that was one incident.
But we must mention that Afghanistan was ally of Germany during World War II.
Yes.
The German felt that the Afghans are aliens. Also, the Iranians are aliens. So they they were partly protected. They were part of the German occupation. So that was, the laws were changed because of that, through the influence of Germany, about the Jews. Yes. But none of the Jews were hurt. I mean, they couldn't, at that time, they weren't able to hold the business, they had to give up their businesses, and they had to be in hiding. There was some problems. There was some sort of, attacks and demonstration, but basically they were safe.
Yes, yeah, right. Thank you. Absolutely. Mara, could we go to the next slide?
Yes.
This is a little bit of a surprising slide. So Osnat, can you talk about this? We're now shifting to Arab Shabbat customs.
So this is funny, you know, listen, my grandmother would always talk about smoking hashish every Friday afternoon, and that she felt very good. As kids, we didn't understand that because, you know, we were kids and nobody knows what hashish is or what, you know, any of that influencing on our, you know, moods. But she would tell us that was the best time of their day, week. All the women would sit in the backyard, in the yard, and they would smoke this, and they had so much time. And so when I grew up and I realized what the influence of hashish does on one's person, I remembered my grandmother's stories, and I was always fascinated with it. And until today, I'm laughing because, you know, it was allowed. I mean, they all smoked pot, and men smoke. I mean, it was open, and so it wasn't anything bad according to them. So just I always like to bring this up. And this is an antique hashish pipe. That's how they smoked it.
Thank you. Very unusual. And this is a young couple on their wedding day in 1942.
So this is actually Mayor Abraham and his wife. I forgot her name. And they are, look at the dress. This is 1942 in Kabul. And she's a beautiful bride. We have to say that. He's a very handsome man. And look at his, you know, flower on his lapel, his ascot scarf, and the flowers. I mean, I am very fascinated the way they presented themselves physically, the Afghan Jews. And again, we have a picture of 1942 that shows their lifestyle. This is a wedding picture, so it's beautiful.
It's an extraordinary picture. Thank you. Can we go to the next slide?
So this is another photo of a woman playing tabboulin, which is actually, we always did that whenever we had a party. My mom would take this and play it, but she's wearing a traditional Afghan clothing. So, and this is from the museum? Oh,
you sent it to me. You said a courtesy of Moshe R.
Okay, so yeah, so the difference is that culturally, there was a cultural difference between the Jewish citizens in Afghanistan. You see women dressed like this, and then you see the Western-looking people, Western-wearing clothing, which is very different.
So they had both.
They had both, yes.
And we just had a quick question about what age would girls marry, and we had talked about that in our part 1, but just to summarize quickly, in Herat, as in Mashhad, girls would be married as children, as ages 9, 10, but the marriage would be consummated in after first period in adolescence, when puberty started. But it seemed like in Kabul, girls would be married more in middle, late adolescence. Like Osnat, your mother was married at age 16 in 1942. So that was later. And so the reason children were married previously was to protect the girls from being kidnapped by Muslims who are interested in them. So that was a big concern of the community. And in fact, we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Could we have the next slide after music? So Osnat, can you describe?
This is a necklace, and it's called tapesh. And it's the brides would get them on their wedding day. And it was a beautiful gold with pearls and precious stones and very elaborately designed milgrain and a lot of beading, but and everybody, I mean, all the women had it. I mean, whether you were wealthy or not wealthy, they all have it. So if you were not wealthy, it would be made out of brass. And your wealth it would be made of gold. And actually, it was made in Afghanistan by the local tribesmen. So everybody has it. And I was just telling Sarah that I'm, as a firstborn, did not get one, but my sister did. And I was wondering if maybe she got it because she has a girl and I had a boy. So I think it was to be passed on to the next firstborn.
Wow. Thank you. So now, if we could have the next slide. So what we had in Afghanistan, as when we talked about those early marriages, were that sometimes girls would be taken by Muslims, or like a Muslim family, or sometimes girls would want to go to be married to a Muslim, and this caused a great deal of pain and upheaval in the community. So there are two girls named Tova in the mid-1950s, in 1954 and 1955, and their stories were completely different. And we wanted to sort of sketch for you about the two different stories. The first one is Tova Shamulov, and she's kind of represented by this image on the right-hand side. We actually don't have a picture of her, but her story was found in the archives in London. And her father wrote to British Jews in 1955 in August. And he wrote a letter and it said, "For immediate attention and indulgence of Jew brethren." And he said, he described how his 13-year-old girl didn't come home from school on the first day of Ramadan. He went to the police immediately and they searched for her throughout the night. By the next afternoon, the police commissioner informed him that Tova had been located, but that she wished to convert to Islam. So for the next 2 weeks, the police didn't do anything. And the father learned that his daughter was being denied any food or a place to sleep, and she was being beaten with canes, and she was being compelled to accept the Muslim faith. And she was told that she had already converted to Islam, and if she wanted to become a Jew again, she would be killed. So the parents were very distraught. And the father, Meir Shamulov, went to the deputy prime minister, Wali Ali Muhammad Khan, who promised to help, but then nothing happened. So in desperation, the father went to the king's summer palace and presented his petition to the king as he passed in a procession. The next day, the father was summoned to the king's garden, and he waited as the high officials deliberated on her issue. Finally, it was agreed that she would be returned to her family, but she didn't come home. So the father wrote this letter to Jews in England, and he said, "On Afghan Independence Day, my wife went to the ladies' garden and accidentally met our daughter there. She beseeched her to get her freed from these people as she wanted to meet her father and family members and come back to them. I am a middle-class man and have spent all my resources to get back my beloved child. We are totally upset with her separation and her torture and distress. I have been threatened that if I took any further steps to get back my daughter, the Mohammedans at Kabul would attack all Jews and kill them. So I have neither strength nor voice and influence, as there is no democratic or lawful rule in Kabul where I could place my grievance and be heard. I therefore humbly approach and request Jewish brethren outside to use all means at their command to restore my beloved child to me." And so that's the letter that he sent to England. And then at that point, Jews in England asked to meet with the Afghan ambassador. And the Afghan ambassador said, "Well, I'm sorry, she reached the age of legal majority and she could adopt a way of life that her parents disapproved of." And then he went on to outline official government position towards the Jewish population. And he said that, quote, "The Jewish community enjoys all the rights and privileges of an Afghan citizen, and there's no communal distinction in Afghanistan. We have Afghan Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, and Jewish people living side by side and enjoying the same rights." And then the ambassador went on to say, "Our Jewish friends abroad may have noticed that notwithstanding a lot of problems between Jews and non-Jews, there was not a single case in Afghanistan So I can assure you and your friends that we consider our Jewish nationals as loyal citizens of the country and as dear to us as any other national community. So that's what was the answer in November of 1955. And then the archival record was empty, was absolutely silent. And we didn't know what happened to this Tova Shamulov, the 13-year-old. But then when I was doing research in Israel, I interviewed a woman named Leah Dil, and she said that the family had been able to bribe the police and had been able to get this Tova released. And they weren't exactly sure what happened, but she might have liked a Muslim boy in school, and she may have gone home with him, but not realizing all the things that had happened. So this was a rare story of success of the community being able to have Tova Shamulov return to the Jewish community. Now there's another story of another Tova, Tova Moradi. And Osnat, would you like to talk about her?
We found out about Tova Moradi in about 2 years ago when we were trying to have Simantov, the last Jew in Afghanistan, moved out of Afghanistan during the Taliban takeover. And we were not aware of this Tova, who was a Jewish woman. And again, at the age of, I don't know the age, maybe 13, 14.
She was 16.
16. You know, the Jews always felt that the girls were actually abducted, but we don't know whether they liked the Muslim boys and they went with them home. So there are two stories, and but this woman stayed with her husband and she had children with him. She did not convert to Islam, but her children are Muslims. And so we found out that while Simantov was being taken out of Afghanistan to Peshawar, Pakistan, they also got her to leave at the same time. So we found out that this is Tova Moradi, and she actually had children in Canada, and she was actually flown to Canada to stay with her children. So we don't really, I mean, Sarah mentioned her name. I did not, I just knew that she was one of the Jewish women that were abducted in the 1950s and never heard of since then.
Right.
So we have two different stories, that one was able to return to her family and one that stayed married to a Muslim. But she, is that her again? Yes.
That's her in Canada, or or leaving after having left Afghanistan. Maybe she is in Albania by then.
Yeah, but she,
granddaughter.
Yeah. So the other photo is of Simantov, who was the last Jew in Afghanistan, and he lived in the synagogue in Kabul. And he, through Chabad, he was able to relocate to Peshawar, and now he is in Turkey. But we were trying to get him to Israel through the Mossad, and they were handling him to be taken to Israel. We haven't heard from, I haven't heard from him for about 6 months, but because Mossad told me that they are working with him to get him to Israel. So we felt better.
Yeah. So these are two very different stories of the last Jews in Kabul. One who lived her life with a Muslim family. She had 9 children, and she also hid the penultimate Jew, known Jew, Rabbi, I can't remember, I'm sorry, his last name was Levy, but I can't remember his first name. But Tova hid him during the first time that the Taliban were in Afghanistan. If you could go to the next slide. So these are some important modern Afghan Jews. If you look on your right-hand side is Rabbi Shulamit Ambalu, who lives in London, and is a progressive rabbi and very active in the LGBT community. And then, Osnat, why don't you tell us about your relative?
So this is Josh Gad, a very famous actor in the United States, and he is, his father is my uncle, and he also embraced his Afghan heritage, which was very nice for us to see. He actually has a show now on Broadway, and he's very funny. He's very successful. I think he's just a very successful man, and he's also very Jewish, which is good.
Absolutely. And then there's an editor of a newspaper in Israel. I can't.
Ma'ariv, he's the
Ma'ariv.
Doron Cohen is the editor of Ma'ariv, also a very devout Afghan Jew. And what's beautiful is that everybody embraces their background. Josh's mom is American Jew from Long Island, and his father is from a Jew from Afghanistan. So,
yes, wonderful. And if we could have the next slides. So the last few slides are our bibliography. And it's for both parts, both part A and both first and second part of our presentation. So the Encyclopedia of the Jews in the Islamic World is really important, and that's published through Brill, Center for Jewish Art, the Israel Museum, a YouTube channel, Invitation to Piyut, the Jewish Museum, even Al Jazeera had some footage, afghanim.co.il, and then the Jewish Afghan Facebook page. And then if we could just run through quickly, the next slide, it just shows you some of the books. So the book on the left is by Ben Zion Yehoshua Raz, and he is a really important Afghan Jewish historian in Israel. And his book, unfortunately, it's only written in Hebrew, but he is a contributor, significant contributor to the Encyclopedia of Jews in the Islamic World. So you can read his work in English there. And then the middle book, it was actually an exhibit from the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. And all the information about weddings comes from that exhibit and that book.
it's available on Amazon. Actually, I bought one.
Oh, fabulous.
Yes.
And then the next book is actually published by Sarah Aharon, From Kabul to Queens.
Yes.
And that's available through the American Sephardi Federation. And Sarah is the daughter of Afghan immigrants. And the next slide, please.
No, yes, no, she's the wife, wife of Afghan son, Afghan.
Okay.
His father is Afghani. The son is she's an American girl.
Oh, I did not know that. Well, thank
Yeah.
you for explaining that. And then the next book is my book on the left-hand side. And then there's a book on a compilation on Bukharan Jews in the 20th century. And then by Hilda Nisimi is a book about the Mashhadi experience. And then if we go to the next page. And then these are some books by Reuven Kashani. And one is about amulets and the other one is about ketubas. And then there's this wonderful little book from PJ Library called The Wooden Sword, which is based on an Afghan Jewish story. And that's easily available it's a lovely children's book about a poor Jewish family and what happens when they meet the king. And so I guess, I don't know, Mara, do we have time for questions, for any more questions? Are there any other questions?
Yes, I'm gonna stop sharing screen and we can all look through. So I'm not quite sure how many people here were at our first session, but there's a lot of questions about where people moved to once they were no longer in Afghanistan and where there are large communities today.
Okay. So mostly they went to Israel in 1955 when Zahir Shah allowed the community to leave, but he specified that it couldn't be in a large, it couldn't be like what happened in Yemen where the airplanes arrived and all the Jews left. Operation Magic Carpet, that couldn't happen in Afghanistan, that the Jews had to leave slowly on buses. And then they went to Iran, to Mashhad, or to Bombay, and then they left to Israel. And then there's a community also in Queens. Osnat, do you want to?
Yes, there were actually in the late 1920s, 1930s, a very big movement of Afghani Jews from Afghanistan to Jerusalem, and they still are from that period. It was because of Naftali Abrahamov, which we didn't have time to talk about him. He was a teacher that came from Israel to Afghanistan to teach Zionism as well as Hebrew to the students in Afghanistan. And he also had a very big following of young people after being educated by him to want to move to Israel. So there was a very big movement, and we have a very large, older Afghan community in Jerusalem, and they are very devout. They are the one who put together the website, Afghanim.il. They're very involved with the government. They're very intellectuals. They're very educated, and so that's another. And then in 1970s, we had a very big movement before the Russians took over Afghanistan. Most of the Jews left at that time because the Israelis somehow knew that the Russians are going to be there, and they just before they arrived, the Jews were allowed to leave. So they all went to Israel and the United States.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I didn't know that.
Yeah. There were no Jews since 1970, except the last Jew.
Right, except Simantov. So, Mara, any other questions?
Yes, I hope it's okay to keep you a little bit longer.
Simcha.
So Jessica in the chat was really interested, and honestly, so was I, about the stories of both Tovas. Do you know if there's any books or materials to learn more about their lives, or maybe this is just an opportunity for you, Sarah, to think of your next book?
Jessica, you gave me a great idea. Yeah, I didn't even think of it. The first Tova, Shamulov, is the reason why I wrote my dissertation. Because I was in the archives in London and I read the letter from her father, and I just put my head down on the table and I cried. And we didn't know what happened to her at that point. I had no idea if she was lost forever or not. And I thought to myself, this is an important story. The story of this community needs to be told. And then as I was doing my research, and I met one of her classmates, one of her friends, who told me the rest of her story, and that she was safe, and she was able to get to Israel, and she did have a life in the Jewish community. It was just very powerful. But Jessica, yes, you're right. These are extraordinary stories of women's lives, and that they are oftentimes, we don't know very much about what happens to women in history. And so, yeah, that's so important. Thank you very much. And Osnat, do you want to add anything? I think
I think a lot of the girls were kidnapped. I think not only Jewish, I think also Afghan women, women in Afghanistan were really not protected. They were protected by their parents, but that's it. The government did not feel that the girls are contributing part of society. And as we know, women were flagged and hurt and accused of, being unfaithful and killed. I mean, we all heard about the stories of Afghan women's, their sufferings, and until today, like we said, they're not allowed to go to school after the age of 12. They're all covered up. They have no showing of their faces, which are very beautiful. The Afghan women are very, very beautiful women, and very smart, very educated, and they have no voice. And it's very painful to see that today that women are not being taken care of by the government. and it's very sad. So it's not only the Jewish women, it's all the women in the world that are still abducted and used for reason that we should not know, basically.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
We have a long way to go.
Yeah.
To build a better world.
Yes.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I don't want to end on that note. So we do have a few questions for Osnat about your jewelry, and if there's any familial, were there any jewelers in your family? How are you influenced by the jewelry of Afghanistan?
So when my parents came to United States in 1950, late 1950s, they actually left India and they came to United States, and they had no, they were more carpet dealers. And they, when they came to United States, they had money in India, and India, they were not able to take the money out of India in the sense of, dollars or rupees, whatever it was. And the only way they could take the money out is buy a product of India. So they would pay the people in Indian rupees, and then they would ship the product to the United States. And that's how they got into jewelry business, because India was a mass producer of gemstones. And so that's how they got into the business, through that, getting all the money out by using the rupees, converting them into dollars, buying jewelry. They knew nothing about jewelry. My father never knew anything about jewelry. He just knew what to buy for $1 and sell it for $2.
That's a useful skill.
Yes.
But now you are designing your own jewelry. Do your designs have influence from Afghanistan, or?
I don't think so. I think what I learned from my experience is that American consumer wants a traditional jewelry, the Tiffany look, the traditional diamond, color stone, diamond jewelry. And it has nothing to do with designing jewelry, because at the end of the day, we have to sell it. And I do very well. I'm actually on firstdib.com, which is a very big e-commerce website. And I do very well. I've been in the business for many years. It's a good business.
If anyone has a wedding upcoming or an engagement upcoming, you now have Osnat's name.
Thank you for the push. Thank you.
Yeah. And this isn't such a question, but I do want to share Linda's comment in the chat. She's been helping to resettle an Afghanistan a family from Afghanistan, a Muslim one, into her area. And it's really helpful to her to sort of have a Jewish framework of Jewish Afghanistan history. So thank you, Linda, for your work. And I know that Afghanistan is still struggling, like many parts of the world. It's hard. I want to invite Sarah and Osnat, if there's any closing thought you'd like to share with us, any special insight that you think we should all walk away with about the Jewish Afghanistan community.
Yeah, so let me just say that we are all Jewish, and we all come from 2,000 years ago, when we were actually moved out of Israel into different countries. With the Jews from the Arab countries actually came 500 years before. They were moved to Babel, and then they stayed there. They didn't go back to Jerusalem. And then in 2,000 years ago, they were all moved to Rome. And then we have all. So at the end of the day, we are Jewish, and we stay Jewish, which is very, very important. So we have to remember that it's not going to go away. We are very strong. We have the tradition, and I am not. Even though we have problems and we have people that don't like us because they don't understand us. They don't know we are just very good people, very involved with our community. We care about the world. We care about humanity, but but once you get to know, if you have a Jewish friend, you do know how sweet they are, how wonderful and giving.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
What a beautiful message. Thank you.
Gorgeous. And just to follow up on that, the Jews of Afghanistan went through so many trials, so much tribulation. They had such a hard time, and yet they kept going and they kept persevering, and they didn't give up, even though they were the tiniest of minorities. At their height, there were only 5,000. And they preserved their traditions and their heritage and their culture. And I think that's a wonderful lesson for all of us, that we can also persevere in difficult times, that our heritage and our community can strengthen us. So I thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you all for being here. We will share the recordings to both sessions via email, and we look forward to seeing you on our next tour.
Thank you
all.
so much.
Goodbye.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Mara.
Thank you.
Thank you.